day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it. And as he grew, said, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad, come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today, I got a lot to do. He said, that's okay, as he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. So I'm gonna be like him, yeah, you know I'm gonna be like him. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then. Well, he came home from college just the other day, so much like a man that I had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Will you sit for a while? He shook his head and he said with a smile, what I really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later, can I have them, please? And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we're gonna have a good time then. Well, I've long since retired and my son moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I could find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids have a flu, but it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's sure nice talking to you. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. We're gonna have a good time then.
In 1974, Harry Chapin's Cat in the Cradle hit #1 on the Billboard chart. And I'm too young to remember it. I didn't hear it until I was probably in my 20s. But there's something about the mix of lyrics and the melody that is very sobering, isn't it? If you track what he's singing about, it's really about the regret of time wasted or time spent on things that maybe weren't as important as things that should have spent his time on. What's even more sobering is that this song was a poem written by Harry's wife, Sandy, and it really was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The song debuted the year their son Josh was born. When Josh was 7, Harry was performing about 200 concerts a year. His wife, Sandy, asked him when he was going to take time to be with the family. And Harry said he'd take some time off at the end of the summer, but he never made it to the end of the summer because on July 16, 1981, he was driving on the Long Island Expressway. A truck hit his Volkswagen Rabbit, and his life on earth came to an end. Now, the truth is, all of our lives are going to come to an end. We're going to look back on them. And I think one of the greatest evaluations will be how we spent our time, our talent, and our treasure. If you have a Bible, turn over to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. It was Dallas Willard who said, "I don't know of any answer to busyness other than solitude or tragedy." And for most of us, it takes a tragedy to wake us up. But I'm kind of hoping that maybe a sermon would do it. That maybe this would be a weekend as we begin a 3-part series. And let me just say, we're still more than conquerors. I know that series ended last week, but hopefully you are still more than a conqueror. But we switch gears. And for the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about managing our time, our talent, and our treasure. It's about stewardship. It's about priorities. I like to think of it as just 3 weeks to look in the mirror and make sure that we're spending those things that the way that we should. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 11. Here we go. We hear that some among you are idle. They are not busy, they are busybodies. Such people we command and urge in the Lord Jesus Christ to settle down and earn the bread they eat. And as for you, brothers, never tire of doing what is right. If anyone does not obey our instruction in this letter, take special note of him. Do not associate with him, in order that he may feel ashamed. Yet do not regard him as an enemy, but warn him as a brother. If you're taking notes, you might want to jot this down. The word idle brings to mind probably a number of things. One, a no loitering sign, that it feels like it's kind of sitting around doing less than you should be doing. There's a measure of laziness associated with the word. But in its truest sense, the word means undisciplined. Undisciplined. I think there are 2 kinds of people in the world: those who make things happen and those who let things happen. I think an idle person just kind of lets things happen, lives by default as opposed to living by design. Now, there's an old saying, idle hands are the devil's workshop. I think there's some truth to that. It's hard to know. Seems like everything's traced back to some English poet, right, in the 16th century. I don't know. But this one might go further back than that, all the way to St. Jerome, who said something similar to this. But the idea is that in our idleness, I think we open the door for temptation, or we open the door for the enemy to maybe make use of some of that time that we aren't using for the Lord's purposes. Let me try to put this in physical context. If you're going to get in shape physically, you can't be idle. It just isn't going to work. You have to be incredibly disciplined. Have you ever met anybody that just is in incredible shape because they're idle? Wouldn't that be awesome? I just sit around all the time. Look at me, I'm in great shape. No, you have to be disciplined, and we know that. You have to manage your diet. Make sure that you've got some proteins coming in. Why? Because you're exercising and you're breaking down your muscle, and then it builds back up. And my guess is you're probably even monitoring your sleep patterns a little bit to make sure that you're taking care of the temple. Well, in the same way, the way that you grow spiritually is by practicing spiritual disciplines. And so what Paul is saying here is some of you are undisciplined. And if you are, then you need to take note of that, and you need to make some changes. And that's what we're going to talk about this weekend. I mean, you've probably heard this said 1,000 times, but if you don't control your calendar is going to control you. In other words, if you aren't disciplined in the way that you're using your time, just as if you aren't discipline in the way that you're spending your money, guess what? You're going to end up in debt, not just financially, but in many other ways. And so maybe a way to say it is some of you need to budget your time the way that you budget your money. Or if you don't budget your money, then don't budget your time that way. But hopefully by the time we're done, we're budgeting all of these things because it is a stewardship issue. Then Paul says, they are not busy, they are busy bodies. I heard this week. Corrie ten Boom once said, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. If the devil can't make you bad, he will make you busy. The word busybody in this context, in the Greek language, means to busy oneself with useless or needless matters. In other words, the Thessalonians were majoring in minors and minoring in majors. Now, I think life is a constant battle, is it not, between the urgent and the important, those things that demand our attention and those things that actually deserve our attention. I think it was 23 years ago that Stephen Covey, who recently died, wrote a book that, is timeless. Probably you ought to read it every few years. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 3, put first things first. He said something that I remember underlining a long time ago, and it's just, I've never escaped it. I just think it's so good and probably worth jotting down. Anything less than a conscious commitment to the important is an unconscious commitment to the unimportant. If you aren't consciously committed to important things, to priorities, then you are unconsciously committing yourself to unimportant things. You've got to fight to keep the main thing the main thing. In Luke 8, there's a story about Jesus confronting a demoniac. And he actually discovers the name, and it's Legion. Do you remember this story in the Gospels? It's, one of those stories that is fascinating on lots of different levels. Now, the word Legion, it was a military regiment consisting of up to 6,000 Roman soldiers. And so there's some debate as to what exactly this means. Were there 6,000 demons, or a demon was 6,000 per? It's hard to know exactly, but I think it's safe to say this guy's messed up. And so we read that, and we think it's a story about, casting out demons, and it is. But I wonder if there's maybe another application. A few years ago, I read something that Elizabeth O'Connor wrote, kind of her interpretation of this story, and I found it interesting because I doubt that there's anyone at any one of our locations that has 6,000 demons in them. But Elizabeth O'Connor said, "My name is Legion, is the plight of us all." Well, what does she mean by that? Well, I think what she was saying is, you might not be possessed by 6,000 demons, but anybody feel pulled in 6,000 directions? Anybody got 6,000 voices that are trying to get your attention? Anybody have 6,000 things to do? Anybody have 6,000 regrets or 6,000 worries? My name is Legion. You know what? Might not be a demon that needs to be cast out, but there is certainly some time management that needs to happen. If we genuinely believe that God created time and that time is a gift from God, that He numbers our days and that every day is a gift from God, then how we manage that is one of our fundamental tasks, serving the God who created the gift of time that He's given to us. I need to be reminded of Matthew 6:33 all the time. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. The thing is we want all these things, don't we? But it says seek first his kingdom. Now, I want to say something. I love our church, and I know that there are a lot of people who are seeking God. But I wonder how many of us are seeking him first, if we're being honest. See, here's what concerns me, is that some of us are seeking God second or third or 10th. Almost this kind of deal, if God, if you get me where I want to go occupationally, then God, then I'm going to put you first. You know what? Then you won't get there, or when you get there, it won't be what it needs to be. See, this is about making sure that you're doing everything that you're doing for the glory of God. I think at a fundamental level, can I just say it? Like, seeking God first probably means like first thing. Like at the beginning of the day. Like, I don't know, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I do know that how my day starts sets the tone. It sets the pace of the day. And if I begin the day on my knees talking with God, then he talks to me. When I get into his word, then his word gets into me, and it kind of shapes the day. I also can't help but wonder if it means that we don't spend more time seeking God than doing some other things. Now, this is not the church, if this is your first week, where we send people on guilt trips every week. This is a place where we honestly evaluate our lives and say, God, help me. Because it's not about yesterday, it's about tomorrow. It's about what direction you're headed and what God is doing in our life. And I don't know anybody that doesn't need some recalibration when it comes to managing time. You know, I tweeted a thought this week, and this probably isn't a very good gauge, but wow, it got retweeted like crazy. And then you kind of wonder, well, did it strike a chord? And then is it worth making it into a sermon? Here's what I tweeted. And it was weird. It was Friday. I think Friday, it just kind of this thought came to me. Why is it that we want to spend eternity with God, but we don't want to spend time with him? Like, we all want to spend eternity with him, but it's so tough for us to find time or take time or make time to be with God. And I think this is often where the battle is won or lost. I'm more and more convinced that Psalm 46:10 is just the key to keeping my sanity and the key to keeping my priorities straight and the key to keeping my life in balance. Are you ready for this? Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. See, if you're not still, it tells me that you might be too busy. And by that, I mean you might be trying to do too much. And if you're trying to do too much, then that might be a little tip-off that you're trying to be God. And if you're trying to play God, you're going to get burned out and burned. Listen, it's not going to turn out well. I found that I need to just sometimes be still. And in that stillness, I'm reminded that God is still on the throne. Well, we talked a lot about the problem. How about some solutions? You know, and I love the Bible because it's such a practical book. Amazing thoughts inspired by the Holy Spirit that can transform your life if you put them into practice. And so I'm going to talk about 5 things. Let me share one more little story, and then we'll dive into some of these solutions. It was probably a decade ago. I wrote a book. Read a book. Annam Cara by John O'Donohue. And in it, he told this story, and I don't know why, this was the thing I remember from it, about an African explorer who had hired some natives to kind of make their way through the jungle. I don't even know what their destination was, but they didn't stop for 3 days. And then on the 4th day, these hired hands stopped and absolutely refused to go on. And he was a little bit confused. The explorer, he said, why are you stopping? And they said, we have moved too quickly to reach here. Now we need to wait to give our spirits a chance to catch up with us. I remember reading that and thinking to myself, like, man, that's me all the time. That's almost everybody I know. We tend to get ahead of our spirits, and we need to let our spirits catch up with that. So how do we do that? Well, let's talk about it. Number 1, you need to say no more often. The word no is the key to overcoming this tendency to do too much. I think we're busybodies because we can't say no to anybody or anything. I don't know if Andy Stanley coined it, but I know he said it, and that's where I read it. Saying yes to one thing is saying no to something else. That has been one of my guiding principles for a decade, and when I fail, it's because I've broken that lesson. And when I succeed, it's often because I've remembered it in a critical moment. Saying yes to one thing is saying no to something else. So let's bring it down to practical life. If I take every meeting with everybody, then I will end up robbing my family of the time that they deserve, and I'll probably miss quite a few appointments with God along the way. And yet, what I struggle with is saying no to anybody for any reason whatsoever. I feel like a bad guy. It's so hard for me to say no. It's the hardest thing in the world because I'm a people pleaser by nature. But you know what? I've learned this too many times, that if I'm saying yes to everybody, then what I am really doing is I am saying that you are more important than some of these other things that then get displaced and I don't have time for them. You need to know your priorities and know your limits. I have to say no more and more. It's not getting any easier, but I think it's the key to time management. I think it's the only way that you keep from becoming a busybody. You need to say no to some good things. In fact, let me say it this way. You need to say no to some important things so that you can say yes to the most important things. And that's not easy to do. If your schedule is out of control, you need to treat time like money, come up with a budget. You need to sit down, budget your time, and then you need to make sure you don't go over budget in your time, just like you don't go over budget with money. You know what? In the past week, made a tough decision. Kind of coming out of a summer where just sort of reflecting on pace of life, and you know that I want to pastor this church for life if the Lord would be gracious. Lord willing, I pray for that privilege. I also know that I've got to make sure that I'm pacing myself in a way that I can do it for the next 25 or 30 years. And one of the decisions I made, by the way, the word decision in Latin means to cut off. You got to cut something off in order to, it's the yes and no deal. And I just kind of made a decision that based on priorities, just based on life stage, that I'm not going to do more than a dozen speaking trips next year. Now, what that means is that I'm going to scale back significantly and have to say no to some opportunities that are going to be tough to turn down. Now, why? Because my kids are getting older. because my two oldest are under our roof for just a few more years, and I want to make sure that I don't look back and regret all the time I spent with them and them over here and over there, and the people that are most important to me during the one season of life where they are under my roof, that I didn't spend the time with them that I could have or should have. And so what I did is I'm going to establish some boundaries, put them in place. Now, I think you could call them pre-decisions. This is one of my favorite concepts. A pre-decision is a decision you make before you have to make a decision. So that in the heat of the moment, there's not just some, well, okay, because it's hard to say no. No, it's the pre-decisions that are the defining decisions that are going to, in large part, determine your destiny. Okay, so this week, it's almost like you make a decision and then the Lord puts you to the test, right? Like it happens immediately. On Thursday, I got a phone call from a guy I know who's the assistant to a pastor, who's a friend of mine. I would dare say, I think this is a statement, that it's the most influential church in America, might be the most influential church in the world. I'll give you a hint. The pastor has written the best-selling nonfiction book behind the Bible ever. And called me on Thursday and said, hey, could you come out and preach this weekend? And when he said it, there was a little part of me that was like, oh, that would be so cool. That would be so fun. But you know what? It was easy for me to say no. You know why? I called him right back. It was a voicemail. I said, you know what? I can't do it because I get 6 weekends a year, and they're all used up or planned out, and I'm just so grateful for the invitation. Thanks so much. But you know what? I'm not going to be able to make it. And the truth is, the other thing that didn't make me struggle with it at all is that I'd rather preach here than any place in the world. I love National Community Church. And so, you know what? But it was interesting that in that moment, you know, you just have to say some tough no's. Let me ask you, what do you need to say no to? Even important things, so that the most important thing can prevail. Number 2, leave a margin. If you get too busy, here's what will happen. You'll lose your capacity for awe, and you'll lose your capacity for gratitude. You'll lose creativity, you'll lose vision, and the spontaneity of the Holy Spirit will disappear from your life. You need to leave a margin. Anytime I'm going after something that I think is one of those big life goals or important to me, guess what? It takes more time. When I was running triathlons consistently, man, it took so much time to swim and run and bike. It was ridiculous. Like, how did I even have time to do that? But you make time if it's a priority. And so you have to leave margin to allow some of those things to happen. Well, in the same way, when I'm in a writing season, I've got to set my alarm earlier in the morning, and I've got to have that margin so that I can go after that thing. It's the only way that it is going to happen. You have to leave a margin. Well, hopefully that makes sense to you, but let me drill down a little bit further. I think all of us have black holes in our life. A black hole is someplace where time or money or talent just disappears. It's like, where did that go? Where did my time and money go? And then you realize that, you know, you're spending it here or there. And it's like, you have got to identify those black holes. Now, for a lot of us, I'm guessing it's your inbox, isn't it? I mean, on a down day, I get 100 emails. That's on a low-key day. Could you not spend all day, every day answering email? Anybody? Like, just, your whole life could be email. So that's one of the things I struggle with. So during this 40-day kind of freedom fast, one of the things I gave up, have I been 100% successful? No. But it was incredible. On my smartphone, on my iPhone, I moved the mailbox to the second page. My wife is brilliant. This was her idea. Because when it's on, like, does yours, like, add up, like, while you're, like, And then you get further and further behind, and you can't help but glance at it every once in a while. It's just like, oh my goodness, I better answer some of these, or tomorrow I'm going to be incredibly busy. So I flipped it to the second page, and then during non-work hours, I've tried not to answer email. At different seasons, I've tried not answering email in the morning because those are prime hours of creativity for me. And it's a waste of time for me to use my mental energy on some of the mindless tasks that I need to do. And so you got to find different ways to manage and to identify the black holes in your life. Now, some of them might be as obvious as television, might be as narcissistic as spending a lot of time in front of the mirror. It might be when you set your alarm. It might be that you're just not redeeming the time while commuting or when you're at the gym. So let's talk about number 3. Redeem the time. Now that's what Ephesians 5:16 says. It says, make the most of every opportunity. The King James says, redeem the time. I love this idea, and let me put it in very practical terms. I right now kind of wear 3 hats, pastor, author, chauffeur, but not necessarily in that order. One of my big responsibilities right now is I just drive my kids all over Tarnation. And do I ever feel like, oh, I can't wait till they get, a license? Well, yeah, part of me, but there's also another part of me that knows again that I'm in a unique stage, and those are opportunities where they're a captive audience, and those drives across town. Listen, some of them are just kind of in silence or not super meaningful, but some of them, great conversations. But even more than that, it's just time together, spent together. And I've just determined that I'm going to redeem the time. And so whether it's tucking your kids into bed at night or going to bed with your spouse or commuting to work, bathroom, let's talk about that. Some of you spend a lot of time in there. You need to redeem that time. Now, I used to read upwards of 200 books a year. This was when NCC was like 25 people. I didn't have a thing to do. And I read voraciously, but part of it was my time management. I would never go anywhere without having a book with me, because if there was 5 minutes downtime, this is a little bit before the smartphone deal, and so I would just read during my downtime, and I would leverage it. But here's what I believe. The average college graduate doesn't even read more than 2 books a year, but here's what I think. You could read a book a month if you just put a book in your bathroom, and some of you have more potential than that. Some of you could down War and Peace right there in your bathroom. And all joking aside, this is serious. This is about redeeming the time. So we're going to go on to number 4, but let me say this. Don't get overwhelmed. One change in the way that you manage your time could change everything. If you just walk out and say, well, all I can handle this week is identifying this black hole, man, you are going to be a different person because of it. Or if you just say, man, I'm going to start redeeming this routine in my life, man, it will change the game. Number 4, take a Sabbath. Now, we tend to live at a technological pace rather than an agricultural pace, the pace in which the Bible was written and lived. In fact, this is kind of interesting. I read a study this week, and based on their research, if you live in the city versus a rural part of the country, a pause will seem twice as long as to the person living in the country. That's fascinating to me. In other words, I think it's harder for us to slow down because of the pace that's around us all the time. I think part of it is that we're adrenaline junkies. I mean, let's just be honest. Part of it is because we think we keep the planets in orbit. You know what the Sabbath is? The Sabbath is a way of just saying, you're God, I'm not. I'm going to let go and let God. You know what? Listen. Work hard. Work hard. Do it heartily as unto the Lord. But if you aren't Sabbathing, then what it tells me is that you're playing God. And you're trying to do more than what you're capable of doing. Now, I know it's hard to unplug. I mean, but the problem is, like, anybody else, like, if you forget your phone, you panic? Like, what if someone can't get a hold of me? Like, the world could fall apart if I don't respond in 2 minutes. Like, something is wrong. Is not something wrong? I think that ours is the most distracted generation. I did an informal survey in the airport this week. I was out in Vegas last weekend speaking at a church. Went zip lining with Parker in Bootleg Canyon. It was awesome. And hopped on a plane back. And I don't know, I was just thinking about it. I was sitting there waiting for the plane. I was looking around me. And in my informal survey, 9 out of 10 people buried. Totally buried in their phone. And I'm thinking to myself, what did people do 20 years ago in an airport? In a doctor's waiting room? Wait, what do we do? Talk to each other? Like, what do we do? Think? Daydream? What did we do 20 years ago? It's so hard. But here's the challenge. We're never present when we're present. You know, it's the Martha syndrome that Mary sat at Jesus' feet and Jesus said, she's chosen what's better. And Martha's like, what do you mean? I'm running around doing this and that and the other thing to kind of prepare for you to be here. And Jesus is like, no, you don't get it. It's not about running around and doing everything and trying to be everything. You know, here's the problem. We aren't human beings anymore. We're human doings. We're always doing things, so we feel guilty if we're not doing something. I mean, that was the revelation for me on the porch at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island 3 weeks ago. That was the revelation. I realized that I've become a human doing. And I need to get back to being a human being. That's what the Sabbath is for. It means literally in the Hebrew to catch your breath or to let your spirit catch up with you. The Sabbath is so critical. Let your spirit catch up. This is so random, but can I just share a picture with you? This is where I was 1 year ago today. Let me show you a picture. Now, I had just hiked. In the background is Half Dome. The only time, forgive me, the only time I wear a cowboy hat is when I hike things. So the Grand Canyon or Yosemite. And so the next day, I was exhausted. My body was wrecked. I mean, I could barely walk. And there's this river that runs through Yosemite. And we had the entire morning, and we decided to do nothing. Even after hiking Half Dome, I felt a little guilty. Like, shouldn't we be doing something? Like, shouldn't I be on a raft going somewhere? And, you know, I did skip a few stones, but I asked Parker to snap a picture of me because it was an unbelievable morning. I mean, some of you want to be there right now, don't you? I just sat there, reflected on life, gave thanks, counted my blessings. We need to find a place for some downtime. How many needs? Let me just ask the question, survey all of our locations. How many of you feel like you're too busy? You have too much to do, too little time to do it. I think all of us, we got to find a way to make that happen. You know, it's a little formula I have. Change of pace plus change of place equals change of perspective. Half of our challenges are perspective in nature. What we need to do, little change of place, little change of pace. That's what the Sabbath does. Finally, number 5, and then we're done. Enjoy the journey. Can I share a little bit of my inner workings, the way I'm wired? We used to have a minivan that had the odometer, but then had the clock, the kind of, the stopwatch kind of deal. And every trip we went on, I don't care where we were going, we could be going to the grocery store, click the odometer, click the stopwatch, because I want to beat my best time. I want to see if I can get wherever we're going in the best time ever. That's my life. Like when I was interviewed for credentials, when I was 22 years old, went in to meet with the presbyters, and they asked me a question, the one I wasn't expecting. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be? My answer? Driven. I remember thinking at 22, I nailed it. Like, they're going to give me credentials immediately. Huh, a driven 22-year-old. We must ordain him. I was proud of it. I was thinking that's exactly what we should be. The longer I live, the more I feel like that was a terrible answer. And then the first year of pastoring, start services with 6 or 8 people. On a great Sunday, 22, 25 people. And I remember struggling with the feeling of like, am I really making a difference? And there was this feeling that maybe when we're a certain size, then I'll feel significant, like I'm really making a difference. It's a lie from the devil. And the Lord spoke to me so clearly. He said, Mark, enjoy the journey. You be the best pastor of 25 people that you can be. And then you be the best pastor of 50 people or 100 people. That's not your deal. That's not up to you. It's my church. Lord said, you just enjoy the journey. You keep putting one foot in front of the next. And you know what? The Lord has reminded me of that so many times over the years. It's a lesson I have to learn over and over and over again. But I have gone through a paradigm shift as I get a little bit older. One of them has been in the last year. That, every prayer I was praying was ASAP. Lord, would you do this? And would you do it as soon as possible? Man, that changed. I'm praying ALAT as long as it takes. Lord, I don't want to get there sooner. I never want my gifts to take me further than my character can sustain me. I never want to get to a place where I did it, but I didn't become the person that God wanted me to become through the process. And so you've got to enjoy the journey, and it's not the easiest thing to do, but I've always tried to live by a little maxim that Frederick Buechner said, live like today is the first day and last day of your life. It is. It's the first day. It's never been before, right? And then tomorrow, it never will be again. I mean, in a very real sense, I think live like today is the first day and last day of your life. Could we just maybe say right at the end of this message, every day is precious and it's a gift from the Lord. And if we managed it that way, we would be different people because of it. One last thing, then we're done. Some of you are here. And there's a decision to be made. I want you to hear me. 2 Corinthians 6:2 says, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. Don't wait. Don't delay. Don't put off what could change your life in this moment. And that is making Jesus Christ the Lord of your life. Receiving the forgiveness that he freely offers. I feel like I would be negligent if I didn't give you this opportunity. And so at all of our locations, would you just take a reflective moment and just ask yourself the question, have I ever made that decision to give my life over to God, to accept the invitation that Jesus extended to follow him? If you have not, you know what? Today's your day. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. And I can tell you on behalf of hundreds and hundreds of people who have made this decision, it's going to be the best day of your life. Let's pray. Father, I thank you right now For those who are making that decision to commit their lives to you, Lord, as they do, there is rejoicing in heaven. Right now, with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, just so that I can pray for you. But I like doing this because it's a way of sort of physically symbolizing what God's doing in your heart. And so if you made that decision today at any one of our locations, would you just right now just slip up a hand and take it right back down, just as a way of saying, I'm making that decision. Just put your hand up, take it back down so that I can see it, and then I want to be able to pray for you. Father, thank you for the hands raised. God, those who are making that profession of faith today, Lord, we welcome them to the family and rejoice in what you've done in each one of their hearts today. Today is the beginning of eternity for them. And so we give you thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.